Welcome to MasterMined, the behavioral health business podcast. We go beyond the clinical to explore what it really takes to build, grow, and lead a successful behavioral health organization. Each episode features candid, practical conversations with industry leaders, offering strategies to scale your business while staying true to your mission. From branding and marketing to leadership, culture, and compliance, we cover the tools you need to balance care and commerce with confidence. MasterMined is brought to you by Snapshot, a digital agency on a mission to serve with heart, execute with excellence, and build something bigger together. And now, welcome to MasterMined.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to MasterMined. I'm here with my co-host, Jeff Skillen.
Hey, Mark.
And Snapshot's Director of Digital, Sean Whitmore.
Hey.
Thanks for being a part of the show.
You bet.
And hey, just a special shout out to Sean. It was his birthday yesterday, so happy birthday. And Jeff, I don't know about you, but I don't know what it's like being like 30 right now, again. But happy birthday to you, man.
Yeah, Sean, maybe you can just fill us in. What's it feel like?
33. It feels like 32 plus 1. So
Nice. Well, happy birthday. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet.
Today we're talking about the rise of AI, the so-called death of SEO, and what it means for how people discover behavioral health providers. If you're trying to stay relevant in this new digital landscape, this one's for you. Excited to kick this episode off with you, gentlemen. Let's start it off hot with just, is SEO really dead, or are we just trying to figure out how this world's starting to evolve in search?
Okay, so my first take is that I would ask that question differently. Here's what I would say. Saber-toothed tiger, friend or foe? And I guess the way that I look at it, I was thinking about it is before we started this episode, I was like, okay, the thing about the saber-toothed tiger, obviously it's like we could think this could be imminent death, right? The other way of looking at it is just saying, well, maybe what we can do is we can learn how the saber-toothed tiger behaves, and we can actually learn to coexist with saber-toothed tiger because he's not going away. And it's like in the same situation here, AI and AI search is not going away. As a matter of fact, it's only going to accelerate. But if we're smart about the way we approach it and we learn its behavior and we learn its moves, we can coexist and actually maybe coexist peacefully and in a sort of exponentially great way. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I love the saber-tooth example, and not to get too technical with it, but SEO is dead in the same way that like pay-per-click advertising is dead, right? You still need it to some degree. And now actually, from a Google perspective, you need both all the time. So when I think of SEO as dead, it's not dead. It is evolving. I think the issue is that we're just starting to see a lot of these no-click searches, right? And it's because the fundamental way that people are searching and finding information, that experience has changed and is changing. So basically, instead of the 10 blue links, you click one, you go to the site. That would be a great way to get a click in a site session. Now it's an AI overview buried amongst other clicks. You got to click it, then you get a panel of all of these other URLs competing for the same spot, the same click. And a lot of people by that point have already gotten the information that they were seeking, and so they don't click anymore. So when I think of is SEO dead, it's that keywords are no longer as relevant as they used to be. So that means we need way more than just keywords as these AI tools are learning the internet, reading, and then the contextual depth is another thing that we're starting to track. They're understanding what is authoritative. They're making decisions on what is authoritative and trustworthy. They're just referencing multiple pieces of information now. So if you're still stuck on just keywords, you're 10 years behind.
I completely agree with that. And I mean, just to bring this as a practical example, I mean, we've all searched for something, and then the search engine results page, the SERP, if you will, is like still incredibly important that you show up on the first page of SERP.
As high as at the top as you can go. Yes.
That used to be an SEO. That used to be a blue link at the top. Now you have a couple of opportunities to be on that SERP. You could be an ad could show up. You could show up in the map in terms of your Google business profile, the map pack on the Google business profile. You could also have an SEO link below. So you have an opportunity within your control to be there in three places.
As many places as possible.
As many places as possible. Now, the addition now is you're being supplanted by an AI overview at the top of that SERP. and you have very little control over what gets gathered into that AI overview.
Yeah.
So that's where
And it changes.
And it changes.
Just like every Google auction is unique and personalized to each user,
Yes.
so is each AI overview. That's why you've probably had instances where two people Google the same thing, they get two different answers, and only one of them is technically correct, because it still hallucinates at the end of the day. But another thing, Jeff, that I feel like few people actually know about the AI overviews, because Google hasn't really been publicly announcing it and
Right.
putting it front and center. But, 60-80% of their revenue is from ads.
Yes.
You think that they were going to let the ad revenue decrease?
Right.
So AI overview is littered with paid ads, and we can't differentiate necessarily which one's paid and which one's organic. So highlighting what I was talking about before is that you need both organic and paid efforts working in unison. So you have that Google My Business show up, you have the map pack, you have the organic, you have the paid, because you need to hit them at every possible point that they might be experiencing their search. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because over the years, over the decade plus that we've been doing this, we've been really trying to tease out the very specific verticals in terms of paid leads and organic leads and things like that. And it feels like those barriers have really gotten very muddy.
Very muddy.
And it feels like we need to establish maybe some new metrics or the way that we look at this now, because it's going to be. You mentioned the no-click conversion. Let's just talk about what that actually means.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, the AI overview. First of all, it's scary how much trust people are already putting into those AI overviews, but there's very little we can do about it. Right? It's like just recently I planned a trip using AI, and I like to use this example because normally I would have searched for hotels myself. And it's like those hotels never got a shot to sell me, because AI basically laid out my trip and it knew enough about me to say, these are the hotels that we recommend. And then all those hotels that used to have a shot don't have a shot anymore. Right. The no click part was that I read that overview. I made decisions without clicking on anything.
Right, and you had no brand association with either of those links either. And so, that's a huge impact that we're seeing, because it's still registering as an impression in your Google Search Console, not necessarily your analytics, but it's still showing as an impression. Again, we're seeing impressions increase because the foundationals haven't changed, right?
Right.
EAT, right? Like being the experienced, authoritative, and trustworthy, source, like that still needs to be applied from your content strategy. ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, AI mode, AIO, all these all these acronyms, right? They're still foundationally trying to serve people the most relevant information. There's just now multiple ways that they're kind of determining what is trustworthy.
Yeah, let's stay on this path too, because I was listening to the Marketing AI Institute with Paul Raitzer podcast this week, and he talked about it's been probably a year since I have actually went into Google and done a Google search. I auto put it into into Chat or Gemini, to get those search results. And, I was thinking to myself, man, it's probably been 6 months since I've actually used Google to do a Google search for something. And I guess, that's how we're heading down this path. But, I may be the anomaly. Maybe he's the anomaly. What do you guys see? I know you said you planned your trip, but how do you guys search today for what you're looking for?
Yeah, about 6 months ago, I completely switched over to Chat. Google has gotten, I would say, considerably worse in trying to serve informational when I'm trying to answer a question, but there's some caveats to that. It depends on what you're trying to search for.
Right.
On the Chat front, it's going to try to answer your question every time. It just doesn't always get it right. So you still need to validate links. You still need to click through. I think, Jeff, what you brought up earlier is what's more concerning is people are just going to take everything at face value.
Correct.
And no matter the tool, I don't think that's going to fix itself. That's kind of down to each individual to some degree. But there's education around that and how to use these tools as the user experience changes, which I think will be useful. So.
I've always been a multi-input consumer. Even before the internet, I was always looking for multiple inputs before I made any choices or decisions. I'm still doing that. So what I'm doing is I'm using Chat. I'm also using Google, and then I'm comparing the results. And what's interesting, Sean already brought this up, and I think it's important for our listeners to get a grip on this. you need to think about AI as an intermediary that is really trying to discern what you're seeking.
Yes.
And so it is doing its very best, or at least it thinks it's doing its very best to actually intuit or interpret what you're seeking. And so it's thinking about where you live, where, it's thinking about what it knows about you. I mean, it's wild. But, any other query that you've input, it has a picture of you. And so it is trying to serve you based upon what it knows about you. So either that creeps you out or it doesn't. That's just the reality. So that's why I like to take a look at a Google search and also a chat search to see what gets served. And rarely would I take research on chat at face value.
Right.
That's a good point. Good point. I sent you both an article this week from Demystify AI. And it was ominous, headline, which was the death of SEO.
It had a tombstone with
SEO. It was very ominous. But death of SEO and the rise of GEO. I guess what parts of that article did you guys take as being the truth, and then what of that article was maybe a little more hype?
The first thing that stood out to me before we even get into tactics or what we can do, or obviously it's a little bit of a clickbait headline, which we kind of already laughed about. But the immediate thing that jumped out to me were the hard stats that talked about the decrease in actual search volume for news sites, for travel sites, for healthcare sites. I mean, and these are not insignificant. I mean, we're talking about 15, 20, 30%. And in some areas where organic search used to drive 50, 60% of their volume, they've lost that. And so there's no way that there's someone out there listening to this podcast right now who is not feeling this. They may not know that they're feeling this.
They might be thinking it's something else.
They might be thinking it's something else. But the reality of it is everyone who has had any sort of organic traffic, any sort of organic search, you are feeling this. The question is, are you able to measure it? And then what impact are you really having? But before you even get to what strategies do we want to look towards to mitigate this?
Yeah, that was a great article. I love the group at Demystify. One thing that we kind of talked about already that still ringed very true in that article was the foundational elements of EEAT and providing helpful content that's meant for humans. So this is where even our own POV is evolving every day at Snapshot, because we're human first. The content should be human first. It should be optimized to answer and provide as much value contextually, informationally, accuracy, all those things for a human, but it's actually optimized for AI because the AI are the ones reading it first. So it's where you'll see very bulleted structures or talking about the dashes, and things like that. Those are actually things that the AI are wanting to read because it's actually proper grammar if you think about it. And two, it does answer the person's question, but they're not validating that. So then they're going a step further. So the AI is not going to be like, this sounds right. It's hallucinating when it does that though, and that's not necessarily by design from the end, developers. Can't speak to all of them, but it's kind of, I think, the basis of how it's supposed to function properly. It's actually, how is it being shared? Does it have a lot of reviews? Are people talking about this on Reddit, which is, Reddit is a big part of Google's algorithm ever since a year or two ago.
Yeah, so let me hit pause for just a second, because I think the point you're making is so salient to what, this whole topic, which is, it is going and getting information based upon its, what it intuits your query to be, but then it seeks validation for it.
Yes.
And then I think what you're addressing is, the validation is also video content. It's images. It's podcast content. It's audio content. I like to say that it's the five senses surrounding your query.
Yeah. Basically, if it can validate information that's associated with an individual, a URL, a brand, whatever it is, because it's multimodal, which is you're getting at too. It's better for the ability for it to be confident in the results it provides.
Right.
It feels like, okay, this is mentioned on Twitter. This is a YouTube video. This brand has been around. At least I can see the domain for 10 years. And, it's talked about on Reddit, and it has great reviews on Google, where before, kind of going back to our first question, SEO would be as long as you got all those Google, boxes checked, you're in a great place. Now it's it's Google, it's social, it's everything. To your point, it's the whole sense of the internet, because it's reading, it's watching, it's visualizing, it's thinking, and it's remembering as well. So that's one thing that we're talking about with our own POV, is like kind of the difference between, do you want to be forgotten or do you want to be remembered? Because the more that you're remembered, the more that you're going to show in results.
Right.
So
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's a good launching point of, this is evolving too so quickly, and what we thought wasn't possible 6 months ago is now possible. And I guess, Sean, with with you and your team, like, what are you doing today to make sure that like we're AI ready for the behavioral health clients that we're serving?
Yeah. So I love the behavioral health space. I've got very much a personal connection to it. Studied psychology, and so from an SEO perspective, it's definitely more about how do we optimize the information that you're providing across, like we were kind of talking about earlier. It's almost like the B2C and the B2B elements, right? So providers or other referrals that are looking for information that's probably almost more academic, in nature, compared to the B2C, which is kind of a funny thing to say here, of people who are looking for help, looking for treatment, and they're writing these questions. They are searching for, like, what does a red face mean, or a pink cloud meaning, or these things that are very specific to recovery and or the need for treatment. So what we're really advising and consulting with our clients on right now is how can you be an informational hub? How can you be a resource hub for those two different groups? So kind of very similar to how we would kind of frame any content strategy. But it's like the structure, the architecture of the content now, trying to get more testimonials, videos, connect them across the site. So if you have a blog talking about one of your services, let's say outpatient, make sure you're linking back there and back and forth. And then the other element of GEO that's specific to GEO is really the geo part of it. So how localized are you?
Right.
So many times have we seen like a local article, a local digest, literally, of whatever it is online, talking about one of our centers and not having it link back to the website. So just some kind of simple backlinking or PR. But all of those are still traditional SEO best practices. So we're just kind of trying to keep in mind that people are now asking a lot more questions. The what's, the whens, the where's, the how's. And so we have a query that we use in Google Search Console to isolate those specifically, and then we create content around that. And then we track that as well. And those are some of the areas where we see the greatest opportunity. So they'll have lots of impressions, increasing impressions, and no clicks. It's also some that we've seen where it still gets clicks, because the way that a lot of these AI overviews and these kind of like snippets that we see, right, across these chat bots and chat platforms, it's like it's trying to get you a very specific, highlighted piece of information. Well, what's great about some of these very in-depth pieces of content and let's just say things that people are searching for, is that there's so much depth. So people are clicking through, getting to that point and reading something else about it. That's where if you can get them that far, which is the biggest, I would say, strategy, and based on the tactics that we're doing right now, is to get those clicks back and kind of resurge those back. But if you get them that far, then make sure you're linking to somewhere else on the site. Give them a reason to stay on your site. So things like that, and
that's a great point, Sean. I guess, like, today, are you seeing people, like, the search queries in, like, Chat or Gemini or Perplexity, like, are they traditional search that you would have done on Google, like behavioral health treatment center near me, alcohol treatment near me? How are they searching?
Yeah, so those are like really great low funnel, bottom of funnel queries. The intent is very high. I mean, they're trying to find something it sounds like very quickly, going there as quickly as can, whether they're calling or driving. But again, those are things that paid is really an avenue, paid ads, where you really need to make sure you're there, because it's so competitive that, like, if you're not doing paid, you're not going to be in the top 5 of the searches, and you might not be in the AI overview, as we discussed earlier. So you need both in that front. So yes, that's where we would kind of focus more of, I would say, direct response, advertising. But what about the people who are not quite there yet? Maybe they're 3-6 months out, or they have a provider referral who's looking to find a place for one of their patients or clients. Those are the ones we're finding the opportunity, because that's how you kind of fill that funnel. And again, the more that you're optimizing for that, the more you're showing up in these new ways that people are searching, which is the kind of, I would say, the crux of this all, is that people are now just going to Chat and they're searching for something specific. So they're actually changing how they're searching in a way as well. They're asking those more longer tail queries, which have really before chat, we're kind of like going the way of the dodo bird. It was
Right.
like 1-2 single query keywords, and that's because Google personalized everything to each individual person, and they didn't need to necessarily write a whole sentence. It actually, if anything, it would confuse a lot of your results more than if it was just 1 or 2 of the core keywords you were looking for, and Google found you the information.
The other thing that I'm seeing, and I'm curious if you're seeing this too, Sean, is I used to really think that Siri and Alexa were going to be kind of on the cutting edge of search. That never really panned out. But it is interesting, though, that in this new iteration, it's actually starting to bear out in terms of this voice to text. Because a lot of the searches, that I guess 2 things stand out to me. A lot of people ask the questions, and so then it is really more of a QA now as opposed to the search term that we talked about. And the other thing is that almost every one of those AI overviews or chat brings back the results to you. They always ask you a further question and just say, would you like to do more? It's like, based upon this, can I do blah blah blah? And to the extent that you can really master what your audience is asking, you can start to hijack that just a little bit so that you can get in front of those queries and actually serve up your content in a more responsive way.
Yeah.
So curious, what do you think about voice to text, and then how do you see that changing?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that it's going to be one of the primary ways that people experience AI in maybe a limited capacity, like maybe the Alexas of the world, where it's like kind of like turn on my lights or read me the news.
But didn't it really inform the more
like the structure
the
of the
structure of
prompting?
I'm speaking more of the structure than the actual communication chain. If you will.
It was designed to be conversational.
Yes.
So it's supposed to be, after you kind of prompt it the first time, it always wants to follow up because it is looking to seek additional value. It's also just like any other tool. It's trying to keep you on the platform.
Right.
And that could be, that could have some indications down the line of advertisements on these types of chatbots and chat tools. But, it's definitely meant to be a flow of sorts so that you could either speak it or you could write it. And I know that definitely from the voice side of it, I mean, there's a lot that's been developing there. So
yeah, I think it's fascinating. Mark, I don't know where you want to go.
Well, I was going to ask one other question. In the past, before AI, we used to talk to clients about hey, the organic search terms, the first one gets typically 80% of the traffic, second one gets 14%, then 5%, whatever that number was. I guess I wonder what it's turning out to be now with AI involved. How many clicks is that first organic link getting, and then maybe what is the risk to behavioral health companies that are out there that are solely relying on just the current SEO strategy?
So I have a theory, but I bet Sean has the answer. My theory is that I'll bet the first blue link is still getting the lion's share of the clicks. Mm-hmm. It's just the pie is that much smaller.
Yes. Exactly correct. Yeah, because people are not actually clicking through to websites in general as much anymore. So to your point, anything that's above the fold or that number one position, the first blue link, I love that. That's still getting the lion's share. It's just exactly to your right. That pool is a lot smaller.
Or saber-toothed tiger share.
Yeah. But it still doesn't change. Really what you need to be doing. So really, Mark, to answer your question is if you're still just writing keyword blogs and that's it. You're gonna have to change that very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's because of how people are experiencing too. There's also generational elements to this as well. With
right.
Gen Z, Gen X. They are way more video oriented. The advent of YouTube Reels. YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikToks in general, right, is a generational shift. Even some of the trends we've been seeing about how search is changing with TikTok and Amazon way back when,
right,
have implications of how we got here, which is why you're now seeing ChatGPT incorporate more e-commerce elements into it because they want to help you, the brands, sell their stuff, but also again they're trying to keep the users on their platform as long as possible. So it is much more less about brand association now. And Amazon really started that from an e-commerce front a long time ago.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it is now having this bleed effect into every other industry. So from a behavioral health standpoint, what we really try to do is associate that brand as much as we can with the content. you know, like going back to like, where did I receive this? And so when we're mapping the funnel, whether it's like talking about organic, and obviously we were talking about organic and paid needing to work together, so it's overlapping at every part of the funnel. But at the top of the funnel, being more informational, trying to answer people's questions. It could be even more about specific things where like they might start to think they have possibly a problem. You know, maybe they're not seeking addiction treatment yet. Maybe down below, it's like, okay, what are some centers or like what are programs? You know, and then down at the funnel, if your brand is there, and we call it brand defense, you know, and it's a paid front more often than not, because Google will always prioritize the brand over someone trying to compete on that brand term. Then we've captured it. So, but we can't just rely on just one part of the funnel anymore. We've got to kind of guide them, any of the users down the funnel, using all of these strategies in multiple of ways. So it's not just one. So going back to the theme of multimodal content, multimodal strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you bring up the generational aspect, and I think that's really key for people to understand. Remember, a lot of the developers that are doing this AI work, they're more video oriented.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you don't have a bunch of 50 and 60-year-old developers working on AI right now. It's like, and so you're going to develop in the water you used to swimming in, right? And so then that's going to have a much greater influence, whether you like it or not, in terms of the way these AI results are going to come about.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, there was a time where your SEO strategy was largely blog-based, word-based, article-based, right? And so if you don't have that multimodal strategy, then, you know, you're going to find yourself way behind. Your links are still valuable, but they're just valuable at a fraction of what they previously were.
Exactly.
Yeah. Man, you guys are really bringing it today. This is you very, very knowledgeable in this. And we probably should have started the episode off with this, but maybe we, you know, we talk a little bit about the acronyms. So everybody's heard all these acronyms thrown out. And
the
I guess, you know, let's unpack the SEO versus GEO, search engine optimization, versus generative engine optimization, right? Which is GEO, which is a new term. I don't know how long it's been out, maybe 6 months. But you know, GEO, and kind of just break it down in the simplest of terms of what it means.
I mean, we did sort of jump right into the deep end of the alphabet soup. I mean, the bowl is hot. I mean, we just jumped right into the alphabet soup.
Well, we live this every day too.
Correct.
So we're watching it change too.
And I think we need to acknowledge that not everyone listening is going to have the same level of knowledge. Some will, some won't. And you know, let us know in the comments, kind of, you know, if you feel like that we need to do more, if we need to go broader, we need to go more narrow. But we just jumped right in. I do think most everyone understands what SEO is, but I think it's really important that we redefine them, or like define them again in relation to how one relates to the other. So I'm going to give that to you, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, in the simplest terms, search engine optimization, right? You are looking to optimize your website, your brand, your domain, right, for search engines. So ChatGPT is not a search engine, right? Gemini, they're all way more than that. So yeah, Michael King, I heard from iPullRank, coined GEO a little while ago. I mean, if I'm giving him too much credit for that, but it was at least a year ago when it started making its rounds, and you start seeing headlines with it. You know, it's very much optimizing, again, your URL, your domain, but now you're kind of understanding, like your brand again, where it was much more of a domain specific, like domain authority was something that was thrown around a lot with SEO. For GEO, it's your brand association. Like that, I think, is really important, because the AI is not just seeing your domain and analyzing your content ranking and, you know, providing a difficulty score or site health score. No, it's just like, what is Snapshot talking about today?
Right.
You know, and that can be way beyond the domain. It could be on your socials. It could be on Reddit. Again, I think that's an area where we're seeing a lot of traction from where sources are being pulled when it's trying to find trustworthiness, validation, as you said earlier. And so that's the optimization for generative engine. And then a new one, which is very recent, which I think someone was just trying to, you know, get ahead of coining their own acronym. Gotta love this space. Is answer engine optimization. So AEO.
And I've got a fourth one too, the agentic engine optimization.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So it's like, so they're gonna be fighting over the A. On
the
that one,
A
right?
on that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wait till Apple enters the mix on that one. And so, you know, what that really inherently means is what we're seeing is that, like, getting your brand mentioned. It's almost like digital PR, right? Which is obviously its own thing, but now it's like for the different bots, you almost want to, like how you'd optimize for Google, Bing, Yahoo back in the day.
Right.
Now it's almost like, are you optimizing for AIO or AI mode on Google or Chat or Perplexity? Because they all might actually have different architecture, like in the back end, of how they're going to be referencing you, as they're all kind of designed a bit differently, and that of course adds an immense amount of complexity for, anyone in this space, just talking about GEO in general, but obviously for behavioral health, it's incredibly complex. So yeah.
Well, you guys have talked about, just a ton of different strategies and whatnot. And I know, taking it back to like when social media became new in the industry, and it's like a lot of companies looked at it and said, God, there's just so much I've got to do. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm just going to go put my head in the sand. And I'm sure like some of the listeners out there and some of these behavioral health companies are probably thinking the same thing, like, oh man, maybe this will go away. And I guess as I hear you guys talk about all the different things you can produce and the strategies you can implement, beyond just making sure you're working with a competent, agency partner or a competent person internally, like, is it this massive amount of stuff now I've got to do differently, or is it really just a few, maybe many little tweaks that get you to where you really want to be in this space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the answer is a little bit of all the above. To be honest, I like to say that it's really good when you're overwhelmed to seek a third party to help give you some perspective in terms of how you're probably not as bad off as you think, and you're probably not as good as you think. You're going to be somewhere in between. And yes, there are some things that you can do right away, but before you start implementing any sort of tactics, you need to get a sense for where do we stand. You can do your own queries, but I don't recommend that. I would recommend that you actually speak to someone who can give you some objective guidance in terms of where you stand. And then, some things that you can do like right away. Do you know which pages on your website are driving the most traffic? Mm-hmm. Do you know which blogs are the most active? Do you know what is driving the most valuable traffic to your website? And so, first of all, if you know that, great. You're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you need to get to a place where you do understand what's driving the most valuable traffic to your website. And then what can we do around those pillars to then further optimize them so that when an AI bot is trying to be responsive, you have an opportunity of being that first site, that first source being cited, mm-hmm. right? And so it could be as simple as taking your top 5 blog, top 5 traffic generating blogs, write a summary, and then add some bullet points.
Yep.
Make sure that and as you update it, change the date. Change the date that it was edited so that it looks like it's fresh and it's brand new. Mm-hmm. Because now you're giving the bot or the agent an opportunity to say, oh, I see this summary. I recognize what that is. The other thing is to go back over that content and ask yourself, if I were a customer, what question am I asking? And then does this actually answer that question? And if not, what are some ways that I can do that maybe beyond the written word? Maybe there's just a quick video, or maybe there's something that just says, hey, it seems like you're wanting to know blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then you just expand upon that. And content creation does not have to be expensive, or it can be, but it doesn't have to be. I think the key is do we have something other than word that address this query?
Yeah, Jeff, that's such a great way to kind of look at it, because there are some basics that are kind of SEO best practices that a lot of these centers should have been doing for the last 10 years, right? And maybe they just didn't for some reason. Don't get me wrong. SEO, if we're talking about GEO, AEO, all of that, SEO is complex. It is not necessarily easy to understand. You're effectively trying to make educated assumptions on how an algorithm is going to think, and now we're trying to make educated assumptions around how multiple artificial intelligences are going to think about us. So, yep.
If you don't, I want to interject because I think it's really important that I think a lot of people think that this is a game that you can win. or this is something that you that like if you play this well, that it's like, well, somehow I just need to know the secret sauce, or somehow I just it's like that there's a way to actually trick this so that it works for you. There are legends within the SEO world that people have something magic about, and it's like, and I think we need to let our listeners know it's like that just is not the case. And especially the way it is now, it is more important that you're sharp about what you're presenting to the consumer, and then allow that to be presented in a way that puts you on a pedestal.
Yeah, it's a practice, right? This is not a game that ends. Like this is you're showing up every day.
This is not a game, it's a practice.
It's you're showing up every day for yourself. You're showing up every day for the people looking for help. I mean, I think there's a little bit of an effort that can be applied there. But I love that what you're saying is like, yeah, reach out to a third party, reach out to someone who's like who just does this every day. But also like it's your mission at the end of the day, right? Let that person help support the mission,
right?
Because I've had SEO specialists on my team call me when looking through search queries, and it can be disheartening to see some of the things that you're seeing, because we're all in the numbers game too. So we'll see something like that's about a mother trying to find help for their addicted son, and it's got thousands of impressions. So like that's the thing that weighs heavy. But at the end of the day, we know that a lot of this is like is to provide that support. And so what all this kind of what we're talking about here is the kind of the strategies, the tactics, the things that you can do to stay in that game, because it's not just because you're out of the game or you haven't been doing it, you don't know your top blogs, as you were saying, your top keywords. Doesn't mean you can't turn it around.
Right.
Like actually, those are some of the areas where we see the quickest wins, and that's not usually something you say in the SEO or GEO world. But from a GEO perspective too, I would say the one thing that we're constantly look to develop is how are we evolving the way we're measuring this?
Yes.
Right. And so there's a lot of tools coming out right now. Profound is one that's making some headlines. Goody and some other ones that are kind of like in beta. I think the kind of the issue is a lot of this data is behind some closed doors right now that are opening. But I will say we've even developed ways just using your native Google Analytics environments to be able to track the referral sources. So where's your chats, where's your Geminis, and all of that. So it is something that we're looking into, but it still doesn't change a lot of the fundamentals. And I think that's going back to your first point around that, is that once we get that foundation, that baseline set up, it's really educating ourselves first and how people are interacting with the brand today. Because how many times have you run into a situation where the CEO or chief medical officer or whoever thinks that they know what people think of their brand, and we look into the data and it's wildly different.
Yeah.
It's kind of like creating a little bit of a reality check too, using the data and then building off of that.
Yeah, that's where a trusted third party can really give you a
Absolutely.
better picture of where you are.
Yeah,
for sure.
And Jeff, you touched on a little bit about like just people feeling like they've got Google figured out. And I think when AI came out, I mean, Sean, we saw this a few times with agencies that like they produced 100 blogs a day. Yep. And they keyword stuffed it, and that was the new trend is, God, if we can just keep producing all this content, Google is going to continue to push you up the rank. And it had the opposite effect, and people dropped completely out of the search engines based on that. And it could have been an agency that was doing that for their client. It could have been an internal person that was actually just producing 10 blogs a day through AI. And I guess, with that, are there what are some other valuable pieces of content beyond just blog posts? We know they're still relevant. We know they've got to be written by humans. We know that a lot of this stuff is continuing to evolve. But what are you seeing from additional content needs for clients?
Well, so I will go back to the EAT sort of pyramid here. We know that in terms of authority, a .gov or a .edu domain is almost always going to receive priority in terms of authority. So what I would do is I would take a look at what are the various things that are surrounding your brand, and then think of high quality indicators pointing back towards your brand, right? So that would be like a trusted clinician who's not employed by you that speaks highly of you, and then there's a way that you can actually get that backlink, or you can get that video footage, or whatever, or you get a university study where you do some sort of a pilot program for data research or something like that, where you can get the imprimatur of an EDU shining some light onto your brand. A .gov is also. I mean, so you think about. Those are the obvious ones in terms of providing authority. Some of the less obvious ones, and Sean's already mentioned it, Reddit. I mean, it's like there are a lot of low-lying indicators that maybe we haven't paid as much attention to that we probably should, like Yelp, like Reddit. And when was the last time you did some searching and some snooping around on Reddit to see how your brand shows up?
Right.
It's important. And it's like, fair or not fair, those are all indicators that point back towards your brand and will influence what that AI engine is going to serve.
Yeah, I mean, what you're really kind of touching on is reviews. Like how are people reviewing and viewing?
I'd lump that in third-party validation.
Yeah,
but
third-party validation.
But consumer reviews, 100%.
Yeah, I mean that's why you see this across the board still. If you're on Google and you've seen that map pack as you're searching for, because like I was just searching for HVAC guys the other day, and guess the one that I picked? It was the one that had the most amount of reviews with the highest rating, 4.9 and 500, whatever it was. And that's very true too. Like that's why when we kind of work with the new center, that's one of the first things that we'll audit and let them know, because if there've been some reviews that haven't been, let's say, so stellar, we have to kind of write up the game like, hey, we have to fix this. Sometimes that's an operational issue. So we've gone from a digital SEO audit to, hey, your operations might need some improvements because we need to get this back on there. And it's because it's all it's all about being trustworthy, right? That's why managing your reviews is going to be important. Why you don't report the bad ones, you kind of take it on the chin, and then you do some internal work to bring those back up, because that is what at the end of the day everyone's going to be talking about on Reddit if it goes there, but they're saying it to Google directly, and Google's reading it. So it's all that brand association that it's now being compiled, because it's no longer just one or two products anymore. Right. It's any mention of you. That's why it's gone more of from the domain standpoint, and it's still very important. Technical SEO is still very, very important, and to this content, this generative side of it of how is Jeff Skillen's, center doing today, and it's like, oh, I'm hearing this over there. It's becoming nebulous.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to track right now.
Well, it was, I agree with that. And then there's another aspect that we've touched on briefly that I think we should revisit, which is things becoming local or hyper-local. That's not new.
No.
But it's sort of on steroids now.
Yes.
So I'll point out that yesterday, for example, I got an inquiry from a program that I was checking out their website. They were wanting kind of just a little checkup on how things were going. And I live in Tennessee. They aren't in Tennessee. So I typed in directly their URL, and immediately the first thing that I got was not their website. What I got was something from Google saying, do you want to look for programs more directly in your area? It assumed that I was a consumer seeking treatment. So
wow.
There's another barrier right there where it was like, here I am. I had all the intent of the world in the world. It's like I typed in that program's URL directly. I thought I would go directly to their website. Nope. There was an intermediary that basically said, looks like you're seeking treatment. Would you like to find something closer to where you are? And I'm like, okay, that is an eye opener.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
So from a local and a hyper local standpoint, that really brings up the idea of, it's like, yes, it's great to have PR that might be on a more national or a regional, but what can we do to make sure that we're actually juicing it from a really local standpoint? Because that seems to be where, these engines really want to drive people.
They really do. Like in some of the deep research that we've done, we have seen the most obscure articles get referenced that we wouldn't have found in any other way, and it's very localized, and it's because it's going to that level of depth. It has the capability of going to that level of depth. So very much so. So everything from the map pack, the GBB profiles, like your Yelp, which is with I think an interesting angle as well. All of those need to be very well optimized, so that people can understand where you are, and so can these generative engines that are contextually referencing locations and connecting it back to individuals too. So it's no longer Jeff Skillen at this IP address, and that's what Google's approximating your location, right?
Right.
It is no, hey Jeff, how you doing? And it knows you now, and so it can predict a little bit differently as well.
So do you think that so programs that are trying to market nationally, what impact do you think that's going to have? Is like, I mean, are we going to have to change the strategy of just say you're going to have difficulty being known nationally,
right?
Because all of the digital engines are trying to make this hyper local.
There's two things to that. One, there's a lot of centers that we work with, right, where they're maybe a little bit more affluent or niche, and then let's say their clientele, so to speak, where they are targeting multiple states. Kind of we called it even 1,000-mile radius with one of our clients earlier. And there's practicality to that. There is in the same vein as almost like a boarding school, so there's that element where it's like, no, but you're not necessarily, if you're in Georgia, you're not necessarily creating localized content for New Mexico, right? So in terms of tactics, yeah, I mean, maybe your paid strategy is a little bit more of a wider net, but you're not going out and seeking, the local New Mexico paper, in Albuquerque, to write about you and you're in Georgia. Like that would be, I would say, misdirected. But in Georgia, yeah, you would want people talking about you because then it associates more of where you're physically present and the validity or the validation and the trustworthiness of your program by these third-party sources in the area. And so it's a little complex, but it's a little bit of yes and no.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we start to wrap it up today and kind of taking it all the way back to the beginning, do you all, it sounds like GEO is not going to replace SEO. It's going to augment it, and we're going to need to be thinking about all of it together, as well as like the content that's going to feed both SEO and GEO to make you relevant in the search engine.
Yeah, I think a great way to think about it, and curious if you guys agree. I mean, SEO best practices are the foundation, the base of the pyramid, and this is in addition to. So it just takes the best practice and just refines it, sharpens it, makes it more focused.
Yeah, what I was saying for so long is why our POV at Snapshot changes so much. Just ask me on Monday, and I'll tell you something different by Tuesday. Is pretty much SEO best practices are GEO best practices. I would say the one thing that I haven't heard enough people talk about, which is why I've been kind of like, there is this distinction. There is a distinction. It's in the user experience of how people are searching. Right. Search has changed. I mean, search marketers want to kind of say that and not really do anything about it. But this is something that's gone, all the way back to Amazon when the differentiation or the bifurcation of product-related searches and informational-related searches kind of split. Then there's TikTok. That's a generational thing that we talked about. Now it's the user experience itself is changing.
Right.
It's people are not clicking through. They are getting their information and they're walking away. So how can we be more informational? How can we target more, not necessarily niche keywords, because volume is, of course, still something that we need to make sure that we're hitting, but not something that is as difficult a keyword, as a longer tail. It's informational and it requires a click-through. It requires a little bit more information. I mean, you're making some educated assumptions again. You're like, if someone is searching for 5 to 6, keywords, it's a question of what is, and it's not just addiction treatment center near me. It might be like, what does going cold turkey from alcohol look like? These are real queries that we see. Making sure you're answering that question in a number of ways, in a number of different places on your site, is the way that you can get that AI overview and that click-through. Yeah. Because sometimes you're going to be going against a lot of people doing the same thing, and at the end of the day, no one is fixing or no one has solved the no-click search problem, but those are those incremental ways, as you said, kind of like these augments, these tweaks to what we've been doing while tracking the changes in real time. Because, this user experience could change tomorrow. It could become very conversational where now most people are engaging with AI via the Siri on their phone.
Right.
I don't think it'll be Siri for a long time.
No,
but
I don't think it will.
But it could be that they update ChatGPT and now it's so integrated that, wow, don't even need to type it anymore, and then that's another evolution of the experience.
This may be a future episode, but I mean, if we were to look into the crystal ball, I believe that a lot of the walls that we're used to experiencing right now in terms of operating system, in terms of apps, in terms of programs, I think those walls are really gonna come down, where where AI becomes more of an operating system and less of like, I have an app that does this and I have a word processor that does this and I've got a browser that does that. I believe that segmentation is going to come down dramatically.
Yeah. If anyone's seen the movie Her, that was an operating system, and I agree with you as well. I mean, and Sam Altman and John Ivey just kind of joined forces, and they're planning on doing wearables at some point. Could take 10 years, but yeah, you might not necessarily have an iPhone. You might have a ChatGPT phone.
Well,
it might not even be a phone at that point.
It probably won't be a phone.
Right.
I mean, it may not even be a device. I mean, so it's like,
that's a good point.
We could have a completely future-looking episode, and I think we should. It'd be a lot of fun. Another thing that I would point out, that this is not just an existential issue for service providers, or I mean, Google is threatened. I mean, it's like, I mean, the pillars of this tech economy, they actually are feeling their own existential threat. So it's like things are changing so quickly and things are moving around so quickly. It's really important that you align yourself with someone who's dialed in, paying attention, and has got a front row seat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you said it before. And so kind of like circling back is like, understand where you're at today, know where you can track some of these changes. I mean, all these tools go back months, if not years. Google Search Console is only 16 months, but if you haven't looked into that, if you haven't seen your top pages, your top queries, if you don't have any sense of that, then you've really got to start doing that like today. And then start to think about like, okay, now I'm seeing how I'm ranking, but what do I want to be saying? What do I want to be remembered for?
What do I exactly? I mean, like for example, if you want to be the premier trauma program,
exactly,
it's like, is that where you're really showing up?
Right.
I mean, and some people are shocked when they realize it's like, whoa, that's not who we are. And I'm like, that's who Google thinks you are.
And especially in this space, we deal with it all the time, is that like there's two pillars that we try to satisfy with this in mind. You've got the referrals, the other providers seeking, help for their patients. And there might be a lot more academic, right? But don't think that people are going to know what your acronyms mean. Just like how a lot of people don't know what GEO means. A lot of people searching for help are not going to know what IOP means. They might have heard of PHP, but not as PHP. Maybe it was partial hospitalization. Like understanding how people, like where they're at today, and then segmenting those groups and then optimizing against both. Like, and sometimes one article can satisfy both to some degree, something that we try to do to be concise. But you got to really know that one person is going to talk differently than the other one and search differently, therefore. And so understanding that is one of the first hurdles we work with centers, because they throwing out acronyms just like I am, and it's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So what would you think that someone who's in the possible worst part of their life they know what they're what any of that means? So, but it doesn't mean you can't say it. It just means understand that people might need a little bit more of a breakdown, kind of like what we should have done at the beginning of this.
Well, I mean, I'll just say in terms of something you could walk away with. Yes, if you finish this episode and you're like, what can I do today? Sean is right in terms of like, look at your own dashboards, look at your own metrics. And then I would just say, for something actionable, again, if you identify what those top performers are, think about that overview, think about how you can bullet point summarize that, and think about 3 different ways you can say that. That could be video, that could be audio, that could be a graphic, that could be a picture. But think it's like, once you've got that overview and once you've got those bullet points, say it 3 different ways.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, like one of the last questions, just, you mentioned existential threat that AI is bringing not only to, big giant companies, but just everybody across the board. Is there anything that maybe we're underestimating today about AI that you see?
Yes. Actually, I think there is something that we're underestimating. And I touched on it at the very beginning of the episode. I think studies are already showing that the more you use AI, the less critical thinking skills you have. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that we are greatly underestimating here is how much trust people are putting into the results that they receive, and then not doing their own third party or separate validation, or, trusting too much. I just think sometimes, and this is kind of sad, but I just think about how prescient that Pixar movie WALL-E is.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we are underestimating the impact of what producers are doing and what consumers are consuming. And I think there needs to be more thought and energy around that. But again, that's a much bigger topic, mm-hmm. but I think that we are greatly underestimating the trust that people put into the content they consume.
I 100% agree with that. It's like the threat of convenience. And I think the issue is because it is incredibly convenient to just type in what is this, and something spit out and highlight right at the top of the fold just all these UX best practices to direct someone's gaze, and they get their answer, and they think they got their answer. And so, I mean, it's been an issue before ChatGPT, but
Right.
like the death of critical thinking, and I think from this is why I think this information and why like these podcasts are so important, is because there's always going to be someone who's going to want to actually critically think, and those are the people that I think are going to be the most successful. There's going to be a lot of people who are just going to get their answer and move on, and you were going to have to change a little bit of how we look at some of this data, but there's always going to be people who will go a step further. There'll also be always a center that will kind of develop the best digital strategy they could, or GEO strategy, or whatever strategy, and then bring it back to how they're operationally trying to be efficient, and I think those are the ones that are going to win out at the end of the day, right? Because the whole purpose of these things is to provide the most amount of value. And over time, if value is not being provided, then that will be deranked or forgotten.
Yeah.
So, I would say stay the course. That might still be, a thing that we'll have to worry about,
Right.
but it doesn't change what you need to do today.
And then, Mark, I think to the flip side, I think it would be hard to overhype this. I think it is that large, and I think it is that impactful and that monumental. I think it would be hard to overhype it. I'm more concerned about, what are we doing to actually understand and mitigate the downside?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jeff. And guys, I mean, I think, Sean, Jeff, you guys brought it today. I really appreciate all the insights. Feel like I got a master class on AI and SEO, GEO. So thank you so much. To the audience, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in, and we'll be sure to get back with you on that. Thanks for listening to Mastermind. Be sure to subscribe and let us know how you're adapting to the rise of AI in behavioral health marketing. Until next time, Mastermind signing off.
That wraps up this episode of Mastermind. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, Mastermind is not just a podcast, it's a community. So don't forget to comment, subscribe, and review us. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you content that's relevant and relatable. Thanks again to our sponsor, Snapshot, a digital media marketing agency. And thank you for joining us on Mastermind, your behavioral health playbook.